My name is Elijah Dixon, but everybody just calls me Eli. I'm 74 years old now, and I live right here in Willow Creek, Mississippi. I worked my entire life as a metal fabricator and welder, making everything from farm equipment to decorative gates. And today I live quietly on my pension. Well, quiet is just a figure of speech, because after everything that went down, it took a long, long time for peace to settle back in my heart. Goodness gracious. When you think you know someone like the back of your hand, and then you suddenly discover you didn't know a thing, that's what happened to me after 4 decades married to the same woman. I never thought I'd tell this story to anyone, but I feel like maybe it can serve as a warning to whoever is listening. You spend your life building a history, believing in people, trusting with your eyes closed, and sometimes a simple detail, one small decision, changes everything. In my case, it was a trip I decided to cancel at the last minute. If I had gone through with that trip as planned, maybe I would still be living in that blissful illusion to this day. But fate, or the Lord, who knows, wanted me to find out the truth. It was March of 2020. I was 69 years old at the time. Grace and I had been married for 4 decades, a whole life together, and we raised 2 children, and we built our house on the land I inherited from my father. That month, I needed to travel all the way up to Memphis, Tennessee, to visit my brother Curtis, who was sick. Grace wasn't going to go with me because she said she had commitments with the church group, which all sounded normal, with nothing strange about it. She'd even mentioned that she'd use my absence to do a general cleaning of the house and donate some of my old clothes. I had traveled alone before. She stayed home. I never suspected a thing. The trip was scheduled for a Wednesday. I was planning to be gone for 1 week. On Tuesday night, I packed my suitcase and set aside my medications. Grace even made a sweet potato pie for me to take to Curtis. He always loved her pie. In the pre-dawn hours, I got a call from my nephew saying that Curtis had been admitted to the hospital and that it was better if I postponed my visit for a few days. I was worried, of course, but I understood there was no point in driving all that way if I couldn't even see my brother due to hospital restrictions. That's when I had an idea. Instead of telling Grace the trip was canceled, I thought I'd surprise her. Our marriage had been a little distant lately, that routine that comes with so many years. I thought, I'll pretend to leave for the trip anyway. She'll stay here, and I'll come back at the end of the day with flowers and a gift. I'll prepare a special dinner with a good bottle of wine. I thought it would be romantic. What a silly idea for a 69-year-old man, right? But at the time, it seemed like a brilliant plan. What I didn't know was that this one decision would change everything, and I mean everything, in my life. And not for the better. It was the side you never expect. The one you can't even imagine exists. Sometimes you live your whole life next to a person and think you know everything about them. But there are things, my people, that only God truly knows. If you're enjoying my story, please leave a like to bring some cheer to this 74-year-old man's heart. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my upcoming life stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching this video from and what time it is there right now. It makes me so happy to know what corner of the world and what time of day y'all are listening to me. I was born right here in Willow Creek back in 1951, when everything was a lot different than it is today. My father, Mr. Robert Dixon, owned a small property where he grew corn and soybeans, like almost everyone in this area. There were 5 of us kids, me, Curtis, Marcus, Tanisha, and Chantel. I was the second oldest. Our house was simple, a wood frame place with a potbelly stove that stayed lit all day in the winter to keep out the cold that hit us out here. Lord, was it cold? Frost would cover everything early in the morning, and we'd head out with numb feet to help with the chores. Life wasn't easy, but it was good. My mother, Mrs. Soledad, made the best collard greens and fried catfish with hush puppies I've ever tasted in my life. She also prepared those traditional Sunday pot roasts with gravy and sides that you only get down here in the South. The biggest treat was when we had a little extra cash and she'd make a fresh peach cobbler. What a delight! We'd eat it warm with a glass of fresh drawn milk. I studied up to the 4th grade at the little country schoolhouse, which was about 2 miles from our home. I walked there every day with my siblings. When it rained, we wrapped ourselves in old burlap sacks that Mama fixed up. But even then, we'd still arrive soaked. In the dead of winter, there were days we couldn't go at all. The teachers understood. It was like that for everyone. They knew we were needed to help on the farm. It was also around that time, I must have been about 9 years old, in 1960, that I discovered my calling. My daddy took me to Mr. Frank Powell's machine shop. Mr. Powell was a big, strong man who had served in the war and had settled here after. We needed a tool repaired, and I was absolutely fascinated watching that powerful man shaping the red-hot steel, the sparks flying, the sound of the hammer on the anvil. I looked at my father and said, "One day, I'm going to be just like him, Daddy." And Mr. Robert smiled and said, "If that's what you want, boy, you'll have to work hard." And work hard I did, let me tell you. When I turned 14 in 1965, I started working as an assistant to Mr. Powell after school and on weekends. At first, I just cleaned the shop, stoked the forge with coal, and organized the tools. But the old man gradually taught me the trade. He didn't have any sons, only 2 girls, and I think he saw in me someone to pass his knowledge on to. "Eli, you gotta understand that steel is like people. It has temperament. There are times when it's more pliable, and times when it's harder. You have to know the exact moment to work with it," he would say in his gruff voice. I remember during the Willow Creek County Fair, Mr. Powell always invited me to dinner at his house. The table would be loaded with barbecue ribs, mac and cheese, collard greens, sweet tea, and different kinds of homemade pies. His wife, Mrs. Helen, treated me like a son. In 1968, when I was 17, we had a terrible flood around here. The Big Muddy Creek overflowed, and a lot of folks lost everything. Our house, thankfully, was on higher ground, but Mr. Powell's shop was completely underwater. I spent 2 weeks helping him salvage what we could. Many tools rusted. The furnace had to be rebuilt. It was a sad time, but it was also when he told me, "Eli, you ain't an apprentice anymore. You're my partner." That was one of the happiest days of my life. By the time I was 18, in 1969, I had learned just about everything Mr. Powell could teach me. I started making my own pieces, knives, farm implements, decorative hinges, and people in the county started looking for me directly. "I want the Dixon boy to do it," they'd say. That made Mr. Powell proud, not jealous. "That's how it ought to be," he'd say. It was also around that time that farming around here started changing, demanding specific tools, and we began to specialize in that. We adapted implements, created solutions for the farmers here. Sometimes a farmer would come in with a hand-drawn sketch, just an idea, and we would transform it into something real and functional. It wasn't all work. of course. On weekends, we'd gather to play dominoes at the community center, drink coffee during the talk sessions, or dance at the church socials. I wasn't one of the big party goers. I was always more reserved, but I liked being with my friends, sharing stories, and laughing. In those days without television, or all the modern things we have now, fun was simple, but it was genuine. In 1970, when I was 19, I experienced my first great sadness. Mr. Powell suffered a stroke while working at the forge. I was right beside him when it happened. I saw him stumble, drop the hammer, and clutch his chest. I ran to help him and called for help. But by the time the ambulance arrived, there was nothing they could do. I lost not just a mentor, but a second father. Mrs. Helen called me after the funeral and said, "Eli, Frank wanted you to have the shop. It was his dream to see you carry on the work." She offered to sell me his share in payments, at my own pace. It was a huge responsibility to take on the business alone at just 19 years old. But I couldn't let Mr. Powell's legacy die, and so I became the owner of the only fabrication shop in Willow Creek, still just a young man with his whole life ahead of him. My father supported my decision. He could already see that I wasn't cut out for farm work like my brothers. Curtis and Marcus followed his path with the crops. My sisters, Tanisha and Chantel, married young to farmers' sons in the area. I was the different one in the family, the one who had chosen another direction. But Mr. Robert would tell me, "Every man's gotta follow what his heart tells him, son. And your heart was always hot, like the fire in that forge." It was in 1972, at 21 years old, that I met Grace. She had come from Memphis to work as a teacher at our town school. At that time, Willow Creek was growing. Families were settling in, and more teachers were needed. Grace came to teach elementary school. She was a beautiful young woman with long, dark hair, brown eyes, and a soft way of speaking that caught my attention the first day I saw her. I remember it like it was yesterday. She walked into my shop carrying a small bell they used at the school to call the students. The bell had cracked, and she wanted to know if I could fix it. "Are you the welder?" she asked, looking a little surprised that I was so young. "Yes, ma'am, that's me, Eli," I answered. "You don't have to call me sir. I ain't that old." I joked, and she let out a laugh that warmed my heart. I repaired the bell carefully, and when she came back to pick it up, I invited her to grab some coffee at T's Grill, which was right there on the corner. It was the gathering spot for everyone in Willow Creek. They served the best coffee in the county with lemon pound cake, hot biscuits, and gravy. She accepted, and that was the first of many conversations we had. Grace was different from the girls around here. She had studied in the big city. She was educated. She talked about books and things that I, with my simple schooling, barely knew. But she never made me feel less for it. On the contrary, she was interested in my work, asking how I made each piece, wanting to know Mr. Powell's story and how I had learned the trade. We started dating that April, and at first it was complicated. Her parents back in Memphis didn't like the idea of their educated daughter going out with a welder from a small town. But Grace was always determined. "They'll have to accept it because I chose you," she'd tell me. And over time, when they got to know me better, her folks finally gave in. They saw that even though I didn't have a lot of formal education, I was hard-working and honest. Our courtship lasted 2 years. They were good times of discovery and dreams. We walked hand in hand through the town and went to community dances. We participated in the traditional festivals, like the county fair, where there were rodeo events, typical music, and plenty of cold beer. At the school's Christmas pageants, where she taught, I always helped set up the props, and everyone already knew we were a couple. In 1974, at 23 years old, I asked Grace to marry me. I bought a simple ring, the best my money could afford at the time, and took her to the Gazebo Park, a pretty little place near Willow Creek. It was autumn. The leaves were all yellow. The weather was crisp, but the sun was warm. I knelt right there by the fountain and asked her to be my wife. She cried, hugged me, and said yes. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. We got married in January of 1975, me at 24 and her at 22. It was a simple ceremony at the First AME Zion Church, following our tradition. Afterward, we had a reception at the community center with pulled pork barbecue, ribs, potato salad, and that cold beer that couldn't be missed. A local jazz band played, and we danced all night. Our honeymoon was in Nashville, Tennessee, just 3 days because I couldn't keep the shop closed for too long. We started our life together in a small rental house near the shop. It wasn't much, but it was our little corner. Grace continued teaching, and I worked harder and harder. Willow Creek was growing. More farm equipment needed maintenance. People were building more houses that needed gates, railings, and hardware. The work never stopped. Thank the Lord. In 1977, when I was 26, we managed to buy our first piece of land. It was a good-sized lot in what is now the center of Willow Creek, but at the time, it was still considered a bit out of the way. We built slowly, first a shed that served as the workshop, then the house itself. Every single brick of that house I carried with my own 2 hands after a full day at the forge. Grace pitched in too, painting, organizing, transforming that place into our home. It was a time of hard work, but also of great unity. We had a common dream, to build a stable life, have our children, and be happy with what the Lord gave us. At night, after an exhausting day, we would sit on the porch, sip coffee, look at the stars, and plan our future. Grace would talk about her students, and I would tell her about the orders I'd received. And so, we lived, one day at a time. In 1978, at 27 years old, I got a proposal to expand my business. A manufacturer of agricultural implements in Memphis wanted me to supply them with specific parts in larger quantities. It was a big step. It meant hiring assistants and buying more equipment. I talked a lot with Grace about it. She, always the more educated one, helped me run the numbers and calculate the risks. "If this is what you want, Eli, I support you," she told me. And just like that, I went from being a small-town welder to a small-time businessman. I hired 2 helpers, young men from the community who wanted to learn the trade, just as I had one day. I expanded the shed and invested in new tools. The work doubled, the fatigue doubled, but the satisfaction of watching the business grow compensated for everything. Grace sometimes joked, "I'm jealous of your shop, Eli. You spend more time with it than you do with me." In 1979, at 28, we had our first great joy. We found out Grace was pregnant. We had been trying for a while, and when the doctor confirmed it, it was a celebration. She continued teaching until her 6th month, and then took a leave of absence. We prepared everything with so much care. I made the crib myself, all out of mesquite wood with wrought iron details. Grace knitted clothes, sewed blankets, and organized the nursery. Our first child, Jamal, was born in May of 1980, when I was 29. A strong, healthy boy with rosy cheeks, like the apples we grew in the orchard behind our house. I remember his first cry, the emotion of holding that tiny being in my calloused hands. "You take good care of him," Grace said. exhausted but happy in the hospital bed in Memphis, where we had to go because there was no proper maternity ward in Willow Creek at the time. Life changed completely with Jamal's arrival. Grace took some time off work to care for him, and I bent over backwards at the shop to make up for the lost income. But I never complained. Every smile from my son, every discovery he made was worth all the effort. I'd come home tired, but always had the energy to play with him, bathe him, and tell him stories. Grace said I was an indulgent father, and I was. You better believe it. 3 years later, in 1983, when I was 32, came our second joy. Grace was pregnant again. This time it was calmer. We already had experience. We knew what to expect. Jamal, as at the 3 years old, didn't quite understand what having a little brother or sister meant. But we prepared him, little by little. You're going to be the big brother. You'll have to look out for them and teach them, I explained. He felt so proud. In January of 1984, our daughter Zoe was born. If Jamal was my spitting image, Zoe was the portrait of her mother. The same eyes, the same smile, a little princess who completed our family. The house that once seemed spacious now felt small with the children growing up, toys scattered everywhere, laughter filling every corner. It was a mess, but a mess of happiness. The 1980s were years of stability for us. The business was doing well. Dixon Metal Works had a great reputation throughout the region. Sometimes we'd get orders all the way from Atlanta, Georgia, for specialized pieces that only I knew how to do just right. Grace went back to teaching when Zoe turned 2, and we found a trustworthy woman, Ms. Lupita, who looked after the kids while we were working. It was a simple life, but a full one. At least, that's what I believed back then. The 1990s arrived, and with them came a lot of changes in the country. But our life in Willow Creek continued at a quiet and stable pace. In 1990, at 39, the shop was a consolidated business. I had 5 employees, all trained by me, and we started manufacturing decorative gates that were being sold even outside the state. Jamal, at 10 years old, already liked staying with me in the workshop after school, slowly learning the way I had learned from Mr. Powell. Zoe, at 6, was more attached to Grace, always with books and notebooks, with an intelligence that impressed her teachers. Grace was promoted to principal of the elementary school in 1992, when I was 41. It was a recognition of the dedicated work she had always done as a teacher. I was proud of her, of our life together, of what we had built. Our house was fully finished now, with a beautiful garden that Grace tended on the weekends, and an orchard in the back with oranges, lemons, and even a grapevine that gave us enough to make homemade wine. Nothing too fancy, but comfortable, cozy, and ours. Traditions remained strong in our family. On Sundays, the house was filled with visits from my siblings and their children. I grilled meat on a stone barbecue pit I built just for that, while the women prepared the potato salad, the rolls, and that southern rice and beans that only we know how to make right. The children played in the yard, and we, the adults, drank coffee, talked about life, and recounted old stories that the kids already knew by heart, but always asked to hear again. In 1995, when I was 44, a big flood hit our area, worse than the one in '68. The Big Muddy Creek rose so high that it flooded parts of the town that had never been affected before. Our house, thankfully, was safe. But the shop, which was lower down, was flooded. We lost machines, materials, and finished jobs waiting for delivery. It was a tough blow, but the community rallied together. The employees, the neighbors, everyone helped with the cleanup and recovery. That's when I saw the value of having built good relationships over the years. Grace was tireless during that period. She organized fundraisers at the school, secured donations, and worked hard, juggling her job and helping me rebuild the business. The kids did their part too. Jamal, at 15, worked beside me like a grown man, and Zoe, at 11, helped her mother with the donation lists and whatever else was needed. That tragedy, as difficult as it was, ended up bringing our family even closer. In 1996, we managed not only to recover what we had lost, but to improve it. I built the shop on higher ground. We expanded the space and bought more modern equipment. The business grew so much that I needed to hire 2 more employees. I didn't work at the forge as much as I used to. I had become more of an administrator, but I still made sure to grab the hammer every once in a while, especially when a more delicate or artistic job came up. That was what I liked the most. Time kept passing, and the children kept growing. Jamal finished high school in 1998 when I was 47 and decided he wanted to stay in the metal industry. "Dad, I want to study mechanical engineering," he told me. It was such a great source of pride. My father had barely been able to give me an elementary education, and I was able to send my son to college in Atlanta. Zoe was still in high school, but already showed an interest in literature and history, taking after her mother. As we crossed into the year 2000, at 49, our life seemed perfect. Grace and I celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary and had a beautiful party to renew our vows. She looked gorgeous that day in a light blue dress that brought out her eyes. Our children, relatives, and friends we had made over the years were all there to celebrate with us. I remember looking around during the party and thinking, we did it. Everything we dreamed of so long ago is right here. In 2002, when I was 51, Jamal graduated and came back to Willow Creek. He had received offers to work for big companies in Atlanta, but he chose to come back and work with me. "I wanted to modernize the company, Dad. There's a lot I learned that can help us grow even more," he told me, with that enthusiasm of a young, freshly graduated man. And that's what we did. His engineering knowledge, combined with my practical experience, gave the business a new boost. Zoe, on the other hand, chose a different path. In 2003, at 19, she passed the entrance exam to study literature at the University of Memphis. She commuted back and forth every day by bus. It was exhausting, but she didn't want to leave home. "I prefer the peace of Willow Creek to the hustle and bustle of the big city," she'd say. Grace helped her with college assignments, reviewed her essays, and discussed the books Zoe had to read. It was beautiful to see the two of them together, so similar in the way they spoke and thought. Our routine at the time was quiet. I left early for the shop, which we now called Dixon Metalworks and Fabrication. Grace left for the school, and the children left for their respective commitments. We met in the evening for dinner, always together at the table, talking about how the day had been. On weekends, sometimes we'd go fishing at Mr. Roberto's pond, a neighbor who had a nice property, with a place to fish. Other times, we'd drive up to Memphis to see a movie, or have dinner out for a change. In 2006, when I was 55, Zoe graduated and started teaching English at the same school where her mother was principal. It was another reason to be proud to see my daughter following in Grace's footsteps with the same dedication and the same affection for her students. Grace, who was 53 then, was already talking about retiring in the next few years, and the idea was that Zoe could eventually take over the principal position as well. That same year, Jamal, at 26, met Nicole, a girl from Jackson, Mississippi, who had come to work at the bank here in Willow Creek. They started dating, and we soon saw it was serious. He always brought her to Sunday dinners, and she integrated well into the family. She liked to help in the kitchen. She learned to make the local dishes he liked. She got along well with Grace and Zoe. In 2008, they got married. A beautiful party at the community center, just like ours had been decades ago. Life continued its natural course. In 2010, at 59, I became a grandfather for the first time. Nicole gave birth to Kyra, a beautiful little girl who was the spitting image of Jamal when he was a baby. The following year came Isaiah. They were the joy of our house. Grace melted around the grandkids. She granted them every whim. I'd joke, "Are you spoiling those children, woman?" But deep down, I was the same way. I had made a dollhouse all out of wood and metal for Kira and a rocking horse for Isaiah. Old age was arriving gently with these little joys. Zoe found her partner too. In 2012, when I was 61, she started dating Aaron, a math teacher who came from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, to teach in Willow Creek. He was a serious, studious young man from a good family. At first, I found him too reserved, different from our outgoing way down here in the South. But over time, I saw that he was a good man who truly loved my daughter. They got married in 2014, a smaller ceremony than Jamal's, but just as moving. Grace retired in 2015, when I was 64. After more than 40 years dedicated to education in Willow Creek, they threw her a surprise party at the school with former students, some of whom now had children who had also been her students. It was very moving to see the impact she had made on so many people's lives. I was very proud of my wife, the partner I had chosen for life. As for me, I had already passed most of the administration of the metalworks to Jamal, but I still went there almost every day. I can't sit still, I'd say. I liked talking to the old customers, giving advice here and there, seeing the business that started so small, now employing almost 20 people. It was a satisfaction, a feeling of a job well done. Our days were calmer. Grace now dedicated herself to the garden, reading, and the grandkids who came to spend the afternoons with us. I had more time to fish, to meet my friends at the Veterans Club, where we played cards and reminisced about the old days. Sometimes we traveled to see places we had never had time to visit before. We went to Nashville, Savannah. We even made it to New Orleans on a tour organized by the club. It was a good phase, harvesting what we had sown over so many years. The years remained quiet until 2018, when I was 67. It was in that year that I began to notice some subtle changes in Grace. Small things, nothing that made me suspect anything serious, but strange enough to catch my attention. She, who had always been a homebody, started going out more. At first, they were normal activities. A knitting group with friends on Tuesdays, volunteering at the church on Thursdays, a book club on Saturdays. It all seemed legitimate, and I even thought it was good that she was having her own activities in retirement. "It's good that you've got your things, Grace," I'd tell her. "After so many years working, you deserve to enjoy yourself." And she would smile, kiss me on the forehead, and say, "It's good to have things to keep the mind busy, Eli. You can't just sit around waiting for time to pass." But little by little, things started to pop up that didn't quite add up. Once, she said she was going to the book club. And when I mentioned it the next day to Miss Gloria, our neighbor, who also participated in the group, she seemed confused. "But there was no meeting yesterday, Mr. Eli. It was canceled because Ms. Teresa, who was supposed to present the book, got sick." When I asked Grace about it, she changed the subject. She said I must have misunderstood the day. Another time, She came home with a beautiful new dress, different from the style she usually wore. When I complimented her, she seemed a little uneasy, as if she didn't want to draw attention to it. "Oh, the ladies at the church convinced me to buy it. They said it was on sale," she explained quickly, putting the dress away at the back of the closet. I also noticed that she started taking more care of her appearance. It's not that she was careless before, but now she went to the salon more often. She started coloring her hair more frequently. She bought new creams. "Well, now I have time to take better care of myself," she justified when I commented. By the end of 2018, Grace started keeping a cell phone constantly nearby. Before, she barely used the device. She'd leave it lying around any corner of the house. Sometimes, she didn't even answer when it rang. Now the phone was always with her. She even took it to the bathroom when she showered. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night and she wasn't in bed. I found her in the dark kitchen, sending messages to someone. When I asked her what she was doing, she startled. She almost dropped the phone. "Oh, Eli, you scared me. It's Zoe. She has insomnia. And we're texting." The next day, I casually asked our daughter if she was having trouble sleeping. She looked confused. "No, Daddy, I'm sleeping like a log." "Why?" I didn't tell her about her mother's late-night conversation. I didn't want to cause trouble or seem like a paranoid old man. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. But the small inconsistencies kept piling up. In January of 2019, when I was 68, Grace announced that she was going to start a computer class in Memphis. "I don't want to be left behind with all this technology," she said. The class would be twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. It seemed reasonable to me. I even offered to take her to the bus station on class days. Only after a few weeks, I received a call from Willie, an old friend who lives in Memphis. He had seen me at the station and called so we could catch up over coffee. During the conversation, I mentioned that I was waiting for Grace, who was at her computer class. "What class is that? My Dolores took all the senior classes here in the city, and she never mentioned a computer class," he said, sounding puzzled. That stuck in my head. When Grace came back, I asked her for details about the class, where exactly it was, who else was participating, what they were learning. She answered everything without hesitation. But there was something in her eyes that didn't convince me. That night, while she was sleeping, I took her purse and looked for any materials from the supposed class. I didn't find anything. No notebooks, no notes, nothing to indicate she was actually studying computers. The following week, I faked a backache and said I wouldn't be able to drive her to the station. "No problem," she replied quickly. "I can catch the bus right here on the corner." After she left, I made a decision I never thought I'd make. I decided to follow her. I asked Jamal, my trusted employee, to drive me in his truck. We kept our distance. We watched her get on the bus for Memphis. We followed the bus to the station. In Memphis, Grace didn't take the road to any school or community center. Instead, she went into a small cafe downtown. From inside the truck, at a safe distance, I saw a man approach her table. He was a well-dressed gentleman. He must have been about 65, with neat gray hair and sharp clothing. They greeted each other with a kiss on the cheek. Nothing too intimate. It could just be a friend. They stayed there talking for almost 2 hours, and I sat in the truck with Jamal, feeling my heart constricting more with every minute. "You want me to go over there, Dad?" Jamal asked, seeing my distress. "No," I replied. "Let's go. I've seen enough." We returned to Willow Creek before Grace could spot us. The whole way back, I kept quiet, trying to digest what I had just witnessed. I hadn't seen anything explicitly romantic. It could just be an innocent meeting with a friend. But why the lie about the class? When she returned home, I acted normally, as if nothing had happened. I asked about the class, and she told the same story as always, with details about what they had supposedly learned that day. The lie came out so naturally that it left me even more confused. Was I overreacting? Could that man really be someone from the class, and they just went out for coffee? In the following weeks, I was more observant, watching her every move. I noticed that on the days of the class, she came back with a different sparkle in her eyes, more animated. Sometimes she brought home small gifts for me, as if to compensate for something. "I saw this in the window and thought of you," she'd say, handing me a new tool or a sweet treat I liked. In March of 2019, Grace surprised me with an announcement. "I'm going to start joining a seniors travel group. They organize short trips to nearby cities. The first one is to Nashville next month." This was new. She had never shown much interest in traveling without me before. When I asked if I could go with her, she explained it was a women-only group. Just a ladies' thing, as she put it. The trip to Nashville lasted 3 days. We talked on the phone a couple of times. She sent photos of the tourist spots. Everything seemed normal. But when she came back, I noticed she had a new necklace, a delicate piece that wasn't in the photos she had sent me. "The ladies in the group bought it for me," she explained when I spotted the jewelry. The following month, May of 2019, came another travel announcement, this time to Savannah, Georgia, for a festival. Again, it was with the women's group. This time, I asked for the organizer's contact information. I wanted to be sure she was okay. Grace was visibly uncomfortable with my request, but she ended up giving me a name and a number. I called, and a very friendly lady confirmed the existence of the group and the trip. Later, I found out she was a friend of Grace's who had agreed to confirm the story in case I called. The trips with the group became regular, one every 2 or 3 months. After each return, Grace seemed more distant, as if a part of her had been left somewhere else. Our relationship, which had always been close despite the years, began to cool. We talked less, rarely went out together, and even our intimacy had diminished considerably. In September of 2019, I accidentally found a credit card statement of hers. There were charges at a hotel in Jackson, Mississippi, on a weekend when she was supposed to be at home. I confronted her with this, and she said it was a mistake by the credit card company, that she had already called to correct it. I accepted the explanation more out of convenience than actually believing it. By the end of 2019, our son Jamal noticed the change between us. "Is everything all right between you two?" he asked me one day when we were alone at the shop. I lied. I said yes, it was just the weariness of old age. I didn't want to involve the children in my suspicions, especially since I wasn't certain of anything. They were just hints, strange behaviors, nothing concrete. Christmas that year was strange. We were all gathered, us, the children, the grandchildren. But there was a tension in the air that had never existed before. Grace was physically present, but her mind seemed far away. She grabbed her phone every moment, smiling at the screen as if she had a private secret. Our children exchanged worried glances, sensing that something was wrong between their parents. I entered 2020 with a heavy heart, an uncertainty that gnawed at me from within. In February, when we celebrated 45 years of a marriage, I thought about giving her a surprise, an attempt to reignite what seemed to be fading. I bought flowers, booked a restaurant in Memphis, and planned everything carefully. Grace seemed genuinely touched, and for a few hours, it was like the old days. She took my hand across the table, looked into my eyes, and said, "It was 45 wonderful years, Eli." The use of the past tense did not escape me, and I felt a pang in my chest. It was then, in March of 2020, that the story of the trip to visit my brother Curtis in Memphis came up. He really was sick with heart problems, and I really had planned to go see him. Grace, as was her habit lately, said she wouldn't go with me, that she had commitments in Willow Creek. I didn't question it. I was already used to her refusals. On the eve of the trip, I received the call from my nephew saying that Curtis had been admitted to the hospital, and it was better to postpone the visit. That's when I had the idea that would change everything. Pretend I had gone anyway and come back the same day to surprise Grace. Part of me genuinely wanted to make a romantic gesture to save our marriage. But another part, the one that had been accumulating suspicions for months, wanted to finally discover the truth. And so, I came to that fateful day, the decision to fake a trip to find out what was going on with my 45-year marriage. Little did I know that the truth would be much more painful than all my suspicions. On the morning of March 11th, 2020, a Wednesday, I left the house with my suitcase packed. I said goodbye to Grace with a quick kiss on the cheek, as had become our custom lately. "Take good care of Curtis. Give him a hug for me," she said, sounding genuinely concerned about my brother. "I'll be back next Tuesday," I replied, feeling a knot in my throat because of the lie. I got in the truck and drove off, but instead of heading to the station, I went straight to the shop. I had already arranged everything with Jamal. He knew I wasn't traveling, but he didn't know the real reason. I just told him I wanted to surprise his mother, maybe try to rekindle the relationship that had cooled off a bit. My son, always understanding, didn't ask many questions. "You need me to help you with anything, Dad?" he offered. "No need, son. Just don't tell anyone you saw me around here today," I requested. I stayed at the shop until noon, helping with a few projects more to pass the time than out of necessity. I ate a bowl of chili at Mr. Earl's diner, right there on the corner, where no one would question my presence. Then I went to the grocery store and bought a few things for the surprise I was planning. A dry red wine that Grace liked, ingredients for a slow-cooked chili I had recently learned to prepare, and a bouquet of flowers I ordered at Ms. Loretta's flower shop. Around 3 in the afternoon, I went back home. I parked the truck a block away so as not to make a sound. With my heart pounding, I opened the back gate using my key, trying to be quiet. I still remember the feeling of the March sun on my back, the smell of jasmine from our garden, the song of the mockingbirds in the field next door, details that were etched into my memory of a moment that would change my life forever. The house was silent. I called out softly, "Grace?" No answer. Her car wasn't in the garage, which I thought was odd. She rarely went out on Wednesdays. That was when she watched her old soap operas on the rerun channel. I put the groceries in the kitchen and went to the bedroom. The bed was made. Everything was in order. In the bathroom, I noticed that some of her creams and makeup were not in their usual spot. I went back to the living room, confused. Talvez hubiera ido al mercado o a visitar a alguna amiga. I decided to wait. I sat on the couch and turned on the television, but I couldn't concentrate on anything. The minutes passed slowly. 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. The sun began to set, and still Grace hadn't arrived. I started to worry. What if something had happened to her? I picked up the phone and called her cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. I called Zoe. "Honey, do you know where your mother is? She sounded surprised. I thought you were traveling, Dad. Mom didn't say anything about going out today. No, I made up an excuse. I said I had called home to check in, and no one answered. I called a few of Grace's friends, but no one knew where she was, or at least that's what they said. Now, thinking back, some of them seemed evasive, uncomfortable with my questions. At the time, I chalked it up to my own anxiety. At 8 o'clock that night, I decided to go to the sheriff's office. Willow Creek is a small town. Everyone knows everyone. Officer Miller, who was on duty, was an acquaintance of mine from way back. "Calm down, Mr. Eli," he told me after hearing my story. "Mrs. Dixon is a responsible woman. She must have a good reason to be out. It hasn't even been 24 hours. We can't file a missing person report yet." I went home even more distressed. The night was long. I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room armchair, watching the door, waiting to hear the sound of her car arriving. Nothing. The day broke, and I was still alone. I called her cell phone again, but it was still off. I was about to go back to the sheriff's office when I remembered something. Her checkbook. Grace always kept a small notepad with the checkbook where she wrote down appointments and phone numbers. I went to the drawer where she usually kept those things. The notepad was there. I started flipping through it, looking for anything that might indicate where she could be. On the page for the current week, I found one notation for Wednesday. Art. Just that. No other information. Who could this Art be? I kept flipping through, and on several previous dates, I found the same notation. Always Art. Always on days when she said she had commitments outside the house. That's when I remembered the man I had seen with her at the cafe in Memphis months before. Could he be this Art? I went back to the front pages, looking for more clues. On the back cover of the notepad, I found a phone number written in pencil with no name. With trembling hands, I dialed the number on the home phone. He answered on the third ring, a deep male voice. "Hello." I stayed silent, not knowing what to say. "Hello, who is this?" the voice insisted. I hung up. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. That voice seemed to confirm my worst suspicions. I needed to do something. I couldn't just stay there waiting. I called Jamal, my trusted employee, and asked him to drive me to Memphis. "We're going to check all the hotels in the city," I told him, without going into detail about what was happening. We spent the whole morning going from hotel to hotel in Memphis. At each front desk, I showed a picture of Grace. I asked if she was staying there. In some places, I noticed looks of recognition, but everyone denied having any record of her. It was at the 10th Hotel, a discreet establishment on the north side of the city, that I got the first concrete clue. The receptionist, a young girl, hesitated when she saw the photo. "Did she check in as Grace Dixon?" she asked, consulting the computer. "Yes," I replied, feeling a knot in my stomach. "No, we don't have anyone with that name," she said after a few seconds, but her gaze gave something away. "Please," I insisted. "She's my wife. I'm worried. If you know anything, tell me." The girl looked around as if checking that she wasn't being observed. "There is a lady who looks like her, but she's registered as Grace Miller. She checked in yesterday with a gentleman, room 214. Miller, her maiden name, which she hadn't used for over 40 years. Is she there now?" I asked. My voice choked. The receptionist shook her head. "They left early, but they left the key, so they must be coming back." I thanked the girl and left the hotel with Jamal. "You all right, Dad?" he asked, worried about my paleness. "No, I'm not all right," I answered honestly. "But I need to solve this. You can drop me off here and head back to Willow Creek. I'll call you if anything happens." After Jamal left, I crossed the street and went into a cafe from where I could observe the hotel entrance. I ordered a black coffee that sat untouched in front of me while I kept my eyes fixed on the hotel door. Time passed slowly. Noon, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. At 3:30 in the afternoon, I saw a car pull up in front of the hotel. It was Grace's car. My heart stopped for an instant when I saw her get out of the passenger side, smiling, looking younger and happier than I had seen her in years. From the driver's side, a tall man with neat gray hair and sharp clothing stepped out, the same man I had seen with her at the cafe months before. He put his arm around her waist, with an intimacy that only comes from a lot of time spent together, and together they entered the hotel. I was paralyzed, unable to move. Part of me wanted to cross the street and confront them right there. Another part wanted to flee, pretend I had never seen it. But I knew I needed the truth, no matter how painful it was. I waited another hour, trying to gather my courage. Finally, I got up, paid for the coffee I hadn't even touched, and crossed the street. At the front desk, the same girl from before gave me a look of understanding. I didn't need to say anything. She just nodded, indicating that the couple was still in the room. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. I reached the second floor, found room 214, and stopped in front of the door, my heart pounding so hard I thought they might hear it on the other side. I raised my hand to knock, but then I heard her voice. My wife of 45 years, laughing in a way I hadn't heard in ages. "Arthur, you are impossible," she said between bursts of laughter. Arthur. So that was the man's name, the art in the notepad. I took a deep breath and knocked on the door. The voices on the other side immediately fell silent. After a few seconds, I heard footsteps approaching. The door opened partially, and there she was, my Grace, with her hair down, wearing a blouse I had never seen before. Her face went from surprise to shock and then to panic in a matter of seconds. "Eli," she exclaimed, her voice barely a whisper. "What? How? Weren't you in Memphis? Can I come in?" I asked, my voice calmer than I expected. She hesitated, looked behind her, and then opened the door wider. I walked into the room and saw the man, Arthur Blackwood, standing near the window, clearly uncomfortable. He was a very presentable man. He must have been about 70, dressed in a blue button-down shirt and dark pants. "So this is it," I said, looking from one to the other. "All this time, all these trips, these classes, it was all a lie." Grace started to cry, and "Eli, I can explain." "No need," I interrupted. "I think it's pretty clear what's going on here." Arthur took a step forward. "Mr. Dixon, I know this looks terrible, but you don't owe me any explanation." I cut him off. I didn't even know I existed, by the sound of it. That's when I noticed something strange about the look they exchanged. It wasn't just shame or guilt. There was something else there. Something I couldn't quite identify immediately. "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "What aren't you two telling me?" Grace sat on the edge of the bed, wiping her tears. "Eli, this is Arthur. He is—" "I already figured that out," I replied bitterly. "What I want to know is why you're both looking at me so strangely." It was Arthur who answered in a low voice. "Because until a few weeks ago I believed Grace was a widow." The world seemed to stop at that moment. His words echoed in my head without making complete sense. "A widow?" I repeated, stunned. Grace looked up at me, a mixture of shame and defiance in her eyes. "Yes, Eli. I told him and everyone here in Memphis that I was a widow, that my husband, you, had died 2 years ago." It was as if the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. "You killed me?" I asked, incredulous. "How did you kill me?" She sighed heavily. "It was just easier that way. I met Arthur at a state teacher's retirement event here in Memphis, shortly after I retired. We talked. He invited me out for coffee. I enjoyed his company, but I knew I shouldn't. But he insisted on seeing me again, and I eventually accepted. When things started getting more serious, I couldn't just say I was married. So, I said I was a widow. "And how did I die?" I asked, a cold rage beginning to replace the initial shock. "A heart attack," she replied, lowering her eyes. "I said you had died suddenly, that it was instant, but that I was moving forward with my life." Arthur looked as shocked as I was. "Grace, you told me you two had gone to Savannah 2 years ago, and that he felt chest pain." "It was all a lie," she admitted, now looking directly at me. "Eli, I know it sounds awful, but I needed something just for me after so many years taking care of everyone. The kids, you, the students. I wanted something that was mine alone." "And why didn't you just ask for a divorce?" I asked, my voice trembling with emotion. "Why this macabre farce of killing me in your imagination?" She laughed then, a humorless laugh. "A divorce in Willow Creek? Everyone would judge me, talk behind my back. The children would be devastated. The reputation I built my whole life, all thrown away. It was easier to have two separate lives. Here in Memphis, I was Grace Miller, a respectable widow who found new love. In Willow Creek, I remained Mrs. Grace Dixon, the dedicated wife of Eli from the metalworks." The coldness with which she explained it all left me speechless. I no longer recognized the woman in front of me. Where was the young teacher I had fallen in love with, the mother of my children, the partner of so many decades? Arthur looked genuinely mortified. "Mr. Dixon, I swear I didn't know. If I had known you were alive, that you were still married, I never would have gotten involved with Grace." I believed him. The man seemed honest in his despair. He, too, had been deceived in a way. "How long have you two been together?" I asked. 2.5 years, he answered after a pause. "We met at a state retiree event in September of 2017. I was a history teacher in Memphis." The dates checked out. That was right around the time I started noticing the first changes in Grace's behavior. "And you see each other how often?" I continued, wanting to understand the extent of this betrayal. "At first, once or twice a month," Arthur said. "Then it became more frequent. Grace said she needed to come to Memphis for retirement-related business or for classes, meetings with former colleagues." "All the trips, then," I stated. "Yes," Grace confirmed. "When I said I was going to Nashville or New Orleans with the group of friends, I was actually going with Arthur." "But you also met here in Memphis regularly," I asserted. Not as a question. She nodded. "On Tuesdays and Thursdays, when I said I had the computer class." I looked around the room. There were 2 open suitcases, clothes organized in the slightly ajar closet. "And this trip I was supposedly making to see my brother. You two were going to spend the whole week together." Another nod. "Yes, we had planned it long ago." Something still didn't make sense. "And our children, do they know about this double life you're leading?" "Of course not," she replied, horrified. "They think I'm doing all those activities I told you about. Classes, book clubs, trips with friends. And your friends here in Memphis? Do they all think you're a widow?" "Yes, the few people I know here believe that." I looked at Arthur. "And your family? Your friends?" He looked uncomfortable. "My wife passed away 6 years ago. I have 2 adult children who live in Atlanta. They They met Grace last year. They believed she was a widow, just like I did. The situation was so absurd that I almost laughed. So, you have a whole life here? People who know you as the widow Grace Miller? While in Willow Creek, you're still Mrs. Grace Dixon, the welder's wife. She didn't answer. She just lowered her eyes. Why, Grace? I asked, my voice cracking. Why didn't you just end things with me if you didn't love me anymore? Why all the lies? She looked up, and I saw something I had never seen in her eyes before, a cold calculation. Because this way, I had the best of both worlds. Eli in Willow Creek, I had the respect of the community, the comfort of our home, the closeness to the children and grandchildren. Here in Memphis, I had the excitement of a new relationship, the freedom to be someone else, without the weight of 45 years of history. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. And me, what was I in this whole equation? You were part of my life in Willow Creek, the father of my children, the grandfather of my grandchildren. I didn't want to hurt you, that's why I never said anything. You didn't want to hurt me? I repeated, incredulous. You killed me in your imagination, Grace. You wiped me out of existence. How was that not going to hurt me when I found out? I never thought you would find out, she admitted. And that, perhaps, was the only genuine truth she spoke that day. I left that hotel in Memphis a different man. I didn't say anything else. I simply turned around and walked away, leaving Grace and Arthur with their secrets and lies. I took a bus back to Willow Creek, looking out the window without really seeing the passing landscape. 45 years of marriage, a whole life built together, and it had all been a farce, at least for the last few years. When I got home, Grace still hadn't returned. I packed some clothes in a suitcase, grabbed important documents, and left. I couldn't sleep under the same roof where so many lies had been told. I went to Jamal's house, and he received me, startled, unable to understand what was going on with his father. What happened, Dad? Where's Mom? He asked, worried. I sat him down and told him everything. It was one of the hardest conversations of my life. I saw the disbelief in his eyes, then the anger, the sadness. It can't be true, he kept repeating. Mom wouldn't do that. The next day, Zoe came over too. They both wanted to hear their mother's side, of course, but I had proof. The notepad with the notations, the testimony from the hotel receptionist, even Jamal, who had accompanied me during the search. When Grace finally returned to Willow Creek and came looking for the children, they already knew everything. It was a terrible period. The family I had built with so much love was shattered. Grace tried to explain, to justify, but there was no explanation that could make sense of such an elaborate, cruel betrayal. It wasn't just a matter of infidelity. It was a complete denial of my existence. I decided to get a divorce. At 69 years old, I found myself alone, having to start over. The first few months were the hardest. I rented a small house near the metalworks. I immersed myself in work. The children stood by me, but it was complicated for them too. After all, no matter how terrible what Grace did was, she was still their mother. The news spread quickly through Willow Creek. In a small town, there's no hiding something like that. I felt the pitying glances. I heard the whispers when I passed by. To many, I was the poor soul, old Eli, who had been tricked by his wife. That hurt almost as much as the betrayal itself. As for Arthur Blackwood, I later learned that he also broke up with Grace. From what I was told, he was as shocked as I was to discover the extent of her lies. In the end, He, too, had been deceived, believing he was in a relationship with a widow when he was actually an unwitting accomplice to a deception. Grace ended up moving to Memphis after the divorce, selling her share of the house and buying an apartment there. The children keep in touch with her, but things were never the same. Family celebrations, Sunday dinners, all that came to an end. We only see each other on unavoidable occasions, like the grandchildren's graduations or important birthdays. Time went by, and the pain, though it never completely disappeared, became more bearable. I learned to live alone, to find pleasure in the small things. I started fishing more, meeting friends at the club, and spending time with my grandchildren when they came to visit. Today, 5 years after that terrible day, I can say I survived. I'm 74 years old, with a few more wrinkles and a few less dreams, but I'm still going. The shop, now officially Dixon Metalworks and Son, continues to prosper under Jamal's administration. I still go there almost every day, more to chat and keep busy than to actually work. I never got romantically involved with anyone again, not for lack of opportunity. Surprisingly, there are several widows or divorcees in Willow Creek who wouldn't mind keeping the old welder company, but something in me closed up after that experience. I prefer the simplicity of my current routine, without complications, without expectations that could be disappointed. The hardest lesson I learned in all this is that sometimes you think you know someone completely, but we never truly know what's going on in another person's heart and mind. 45 years beside Grace, and I never imagined she was capable of something like that. I never suspected the depth of her dissatisfaction, the void she felt and needed to fill with another life, another identity. I also learned about forgiveness, not necessarily forgiving Grace, but forgiving myself. For a long time, I blamed myself. What did I do wrong? At what point did I fail as a husband that she needed to invent my death and create another life? It took me time to understand that we are not always responsible for the choices of others. Some people simply change. Their desires change, and nothing we do can prevent that. Old age brings wisdom, but it also brings the awareness that time is too short to live in bitterness. That's why I chose to move forward. I haven't forgotten. I don't pretend it didn't happen, but I won't allow that betrayal to define who I am or how I live the rest of my days. My children and grandchildren are my joy now. Jamal follows in my footsteps in the business, while Zoe continues her work as a teacher. Kyra is already 15, a smart young lady who wants to be an engineer like her daddy. Isaiah, at 14, shows interest in metalworking. He's always asking me to teach him how to work with metal. Who knows? Maybe he'll be the third generation of Dixons in the trade. If there's one thing I'd like to say to anyone listening to me, it's this: value the truth. As painful as it may be, the truth sets you free. Living a lie, even a comfortable one, is like building a house on sand. At some point, everything will collapse. Be honest with yourselves and with those you love. If you're not happy, if you want change, talk about it. Look for solutions together. Don't create parallel lives. Don't symbolically kill someone who has stood by you for so many years. And also remember that it's never too late to start over. At 69, I had to relearn how to live alone after nearly half a century of marriage. It was incredibly difficult. There were days I thought I wouldn't make it, but here I am, 5 years later, still standing, still smiling, still finding reasons to be thankful for every new day. Life is full of surprises. Some good, some not so good. The important thing is how we face them, what we learn, and how we keep going. Nobody goes through this world without scars, but those marks are what tell our story, what show how strong we are and how capable we are of overcoming things. If this story warmed your heart or made you think a little, please leave a like to brighten this 74-year-old man's day. Subscribe to the channel now, my dear, so you don't miss the next stories I'll tell with all my love. And tell me one little thing in the comments. Where are you watching this video from, and what time is it there right now? Have you faced a big disappointment in life? And how did you manage to move forward? This grandpa is very happy to know who is on the other side listening to me, and at what moment of your day you took a little time to hear me.